Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the TCR Artist Interview Series. This is Nick and Shay. We're back with another incredible artist interview. This time, we're speaking to a rapper and a TV writer. He's written for shows such as HBO's In Treatment, and also he's licensed his music to shows such as Broad City. Please welcome Chris Gabo. Hey, Chris.
Yeah. What's going on? How are you?
How are you?
I'm doing good, yo. I'm doing good. I'm chilling. Yeah. How are y'all?
I want to know about you. I want to know how you got your start. I want to know where you caught that creative bug. Can you just tell us about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, so I'm from Tampa, Florida, which is like not a city that gets enough love. I when I was coming up, right, like hip hop and punk rock and like theater and all this shit was kind of all just because of, I think it's about geography. It was kind of all happening in the same place. You know what I mean? Like my first plays were at this place called the Silver Meteor Gallery that was like literally across the train tracks from Ybor City, which is where we played all of the rap shows. And also there's a lot of punk shows. And then like kind of down, I'm trying to think of the kind of sort of the northeast from there was like the skate park, which is had the art gallery where we played all all the punk shows and shit. So it was kind of all at the same time sort of thing. And I think that it was just being, I don't know, I feel like a lot of my, obviously like I'm in Queens right now. My family immigrated from Columbia to Queens, have a lot of love for New York. I kind of rep this like second, but I feel like a lot of, when you're in New York, it's like you're inundated with everything. It's like you're like supposed to be in the culture, right? In Tampa, it's like, the backdrop is like fucking, like Reagan Republicans and like, and like people trying to kick Elian Gonzalez into the water. So it's like, it kind of, you have to be counterculture. Otherwise you have to make the thing, right? If like you're in the mecca of the world, it's sort of like, it's not, I feel like there's not enough pressure almost, that's my, obviously there's tons of, don't let me get in trouble here. I'm not shitting on nobody from New York, but I'm just saying that a lot of my friends who are New York natives, right? It's like they sort of take it for granted how just everything around them is so fresh all the time. For us, it like wasn't really like that. So you kind of have to make it. And I think that resourcefulness is in the water in Tampa. And I think that it's kind of why a lot of us came, there's so many kids from Tampa who like ended up in New York and LA. And I think the initial kind of spark is that as a reaction to the mainstream culture out there. That's kind of how I think of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like how you said it's not like expected almost to be a part of that culture. It's like you have to seek it out. Yeah. But it's definitely there. It is very prominent. I like that it was all in the same spot. It sounds like art, music, and skate park. We're all right there.
Everything kind of right. I mean, it's funny. I think Tampa is a very good food city, and people always like kind of flinch when I say that. And here's why. Because there's one place. There's one Korean spot, one Vietnamese spot, one soul food spot. It's not like you can be in New York and be like, oh, I'm in K-Town. There's 300 restaurants and I might go to one that sucks. Whereas like in, Tampa, there's like one of everything, I feel like. So I think similarly, there's not a bunch of places to play music. It's like Ybor City, like Brass Mug kind of Fowler area. There's some stuff Seminole, but it's not that far from each other. There's not like it's not, oh, we go to Brooklyn, then go to Queens, then go to, it's not that. It's like, there's only a few handful of places. And I think because of that, we had to contend with each other. I think that, culture had to contend with itself. Artists had to contend with each other, and genre had to contend with, its other collisions, so.
Yeah, I really love that you mentioned that too. Cause like, when you really think about it, a lot of the creative talent that we know and love today, like a lot of people didn't get their start like directly in like New York and LA. Like a lot of people started off in like these sometimes more rural, but sometimes just like cities, but not really big cities, like these areas like, I don't know, like Michigan. We're both from Michigan, Shane and I, and like so we completely understand what it's like to like be in an environment where like you're kind of surrounded by the same people, same stuff. And it's cool, it's fun, it's dope, and you rep your city, obviously, but it's like, it kind of forces you to be different, like to like do more, to like really kind of like become yourself.
Yeah, because it's also, I think there's a certain, it's like it was that thing that Chris Rock said that like, like in school, like teachers do half the work and bullies do half the work. I feel like if you're not getting your ass beat for, you know, for being what you're into, then it's almost like it's not worth it. You know what I mean? I think it's like, I feel like in Florida, it's like whatever you were into, someone wanted to beat you up for it. You know what I mean? Like just because they didn't like to see you happy. You know what I mean? I think that gave it an extra little adobo on it. You know what I mean? So it's like
a little extra spice. We love it.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you feel, you know, like now that you have left Tampa, how do you feel like you have evolved since then? Or how do you feel like you've carried Tampa with you?
I feel like I've carried Tampa with me and everything I've done. I mean, it's like, first of all, it's a conversation starter because people kind of don't have any idea. Like when people say like, oh, I'm from New York, I'm from LA, like you don't really have to explain it unless, you know, or people, you really, a lot of people don't actually know New York. And like, when you get borough specific, you do have to explain it, but people assume, they're like, oh, well, I get it. You're from wherever. But Tampa, people are like, where is that? You know what I mean? Like, what is that? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? So it gives me like kind of the beginning of, I don't know, it gives me fodder for like the beginnings of a lot of conversations. But I think that frankly, like, I think that I wasn't in Tampa. I was like figuring it out, you know what I mean? But I don't think that I got good until like yesterday. So now it's like, I dream a lot about going back there. You know, my friend Mike Mass, who like, he kind of taught me how to rap. It's funny because Mike's from the Bronx and he moved to Tampa when he was like in high school. And we were all like, oh shit, like this guy's the one. Cause he, you know, he rallied was from New York, you know what I mean? Cause he's from New York. And we're all like trying to be like him. And then it's funny, then I, you know, moved to Queens where my parents, you know, immigrated. And then I kind of stayed in New York for 7 years and now I'm in LA. And then he stayed in Tampa. And like, I watched some of the shit and I'm like, yo, my man, like, he made it cool. Now there's like stuff going on in Tampa that I'm like, there's like a dance hall festival. And like, I'm like, what is even going on here? I thought that it wasn't cool when I was growing up. You know what I mean? To me.
Right.
And now I look at it, I'm like, damn, it's fucking tight. So I really like, I dream a lot about like going back and like in a real way and like being able to like, you know, reconnect and also to like, for people to be like, oh, I remember that guy. He used to not be so good. Now he's good. You know what I mean?
Now he's good.
Like, well, you know, because it's like, that's the thing is that, you know, in Tampa, you know, I had all my first shit and it was like, yeah, I'm sure it was cool for what it was then, but I look back on it and I'm like, we've gotten so much better. You know, yeah.
So starting these conversations, making these connections, how did you branch out from Tampa?
I mean, I've always felt like I had a foot in Queens because my parent, you know, my aunts are here, my cousins are here, everyone's here, you know what I mean? And so we used to come for, you know, Christmas and all that shit. And then, you know, when it was time to go to college, I was like, it's funny, a lot of people, you know, a lot of my white friends are kind of like, you know, oh, my parents didn't support my MFA. And I'm like, yo, let me tell you, you want your parents to support your theater, tell them you want to be a musician and they'll beg you to go to Juilliard. They'll like pay for it. You know what I mean? Like please. Because I was touring when I was in high school, right? And when it came time to end high school, I was like, well, I'll just keep doing that. And my parents were like, no. Like, they were like, we didn't come to this country for you to not. My parents were the first people in their families to go to college. And so it would have been wild, I think, to them if I was like, well, first and only, see you the fuck later. You know what I mean? That's what I wanted to do. But they were like, no, please. So I applied to NYU because they had a dramatic writing program. And then I got in and then like, and I just kind of stayed out here. You know what I mean? But yeah, did I answer the question? Am I like answering your question?
No, you're not answering. No, I love everything that you're saying because like it's leading to more and more questions. And then also you're just funny anyway. So basically,
we're getting to know you, you know, like
yeah.
This is what it's about. It's like trying to get to know you as a person and your experiences and like your relationship with your creativity and your arts. You know, that's what I want to know about you.
It's a space for you, like honestly. Yeah. And then honestly, now that you mentioned NYU, I have another question too. How are you balancing? Because like, you know, people talk about the written industries, like the TV and film industry and the music industry, like they're just so different. You know, like they're just like, oh, they're worlds apart. They're just but no, you can't do both. You have to choose one or the other. But like you have managed to pursue both of your talents. And I want to know how they intersect with one another and what it's been like career-wise for you, like pursuing both of those things at the same time.
You know, number one, I've always felt like what it did is it always made me feel like an outsider no matter where I was, where it's like I go into a music space, you're like, man, that guy's he's some college writer. He's not really one of us. And then you go to like, you know, these whatever collegiate academic like writing space, like he just wants to be a rapper. He thinks he's too cool for, you know what I mean? Like, and so it's like you're never kind of wherever. And so and then it's like okay, I'm gonna answer this question a couple ways. There's a cultural thing that I'm gonna come back to, but for the career stuff, which I think is important to note, is like when I was coming up in like high school, right? It was kind of like this really wild time for DIY touring, right? It was like, you know, the Doom Trees and the Rhyme Sayers and all those, like everyone was kind of like, rappers were like touring like they were in bands, and bands were like kind of, you know, interacting with rappers, and it was kind of all this thing that was happening, but they weren't major label artists. You know what I mean? The way I understood it is the way to like have a career was to like, you know, you go to Alabama, North Carolina, fucking, you know, all your way up to, you know, whatever. And then you're like, oh, now you're here. And then you go up to New Jersey, and you kind of like just build a route, and you keep going. And the first 30 times you're going to play for 10 people. And then eventually you'll be like 300 people deep in every city. And then you'll just go on tour 300 days out of the year, and you'll just do that for the rest of your life till you die, right? And I was ready to do that. That's what I wanted to do. I thought that was like the cool thing to do. And now it's like, you know, I went to college, and then that's when like at the beginning of like the Childish Gambino era, where it was like, oh, this guy is rapping, but he also went to NYU dramatic writing. And I sent him a MySpace message like 20 years, he didn't respond. But you know, then he was like, okay, this is kid who can rap, and no one was taking him seriously except for like white kids, kind of. Mm-hmm. And then he was on 30 Rock, and then suddenly, and people wouldn't see, you know, it was clear. I don't know this for a fact, but I'm guessing that he took that money from TV, which is real money, put it into the music, because the music now started sounding like, you know, bigger and more serious. Mm-hmm. And then he made Atlanta, and now he's like a serious, you know, narrative artist. And then he was like, fuck it, I'm going to sing funk records. And then he became like the biggest artist ever. Right. But like that. So he has a career closer to like the career that I want. You know what I mean?
He has the career that I think most of us,
all of us want.
Sure. Okay. Sure. I mean, that perhaps is a good point. But I think that for me was like, I was like, that's the only maybe template. I mean, I think there's deviation from that, but like, that's maybe the template for me. But so the way that I've kind of tried to do it career-wise is like, it's about resources, right? Because when you're in music, right, and they expect you to be broke, and by they I mean like labels, right? And so they'll be like, would you like to give away all your rights for $100,000? And you're like, sure. But then once you start making TV money and $100,000 isn't shit, then no one can do that to you. And then you can take that money and invest it in yourself, right? And like that, the only reason I'm talking to y'all, I'm gonna try to keep it a $150+1 for y'all, because I want people to like get something from it. It's Please. Like the only reason that you're talking to me is because my publicist reached out. The only reason I have a publicist is because I paid her. The only reason I paid her is because I use this money from TV. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, when I was in my like last year of my MFA, I was starting to be like, I haven't been on tour in a minute. Like maybe this rap shit is over. Like this might be me. I might have just like should have told my parents, God bless, I'm not going to college, and maybe I'd be where I want to be. Mm-hmm. Right. And I was starting to like think dark thoughts in that vein. But then I realized that like entertainment is largely horizontal. Like, you know, everyone at a certain level starts to know each other. You know what I mean? Like, you know, look, the fact that like Jay-Z has like produced a Broadway show, it's like it's all, once you get to a certain level, there's like everyone knows each other. So I'm trying to get to that. I'm trying to penetrate that like level of the stratosphere so that, you know, so the next time, you know, when I'm ready to tour, like I don't have to like text everyone I've ever worked with at the candy shop 10 years ago, like, hey, you want to come see my show? Where it's like somebody else's problem, right? Where like we have infrastructure for that to be, but the only way that can happen is through resources, right? And it's like, the thing about TV is that I was like, oh shit, this is real money. You know what I mean? And I was able to like use that money just to put it into this thing. And then hopefully, you know, we'll see some return on investment in that, whatever, like in the next, you know, hopefully inshallah, like 6 months to a year, whatever. But like culturally, it's also, you know, they're not like, especially because I was coming from theater, right? It's not always the same cats that like the same shit. You know what I mean? Like there's this thing that started happening where basically, you know, because I was a playwright and because people liked me as a playwright and they knew I made music, they would be like, oh, you should come rap at this fundraiser. And no matter what, like, every time inevitably I would get there and I would start to play and they would be like, they hate it. You know what I mean? And then they would ask me again. They'd be like, can you turn it down? It's really loud. And then it would happen again and again and again. And my DJ or my producer, oh, sorry, he doesn't like when I call it the producer, who's my cousin, who is with DJs. He would be like, Bobby, why did you make these people hate us? They like you as a player, but they don't like, it's like so aggressive and they're not really ready for it. And that's also like, I think part of the problem with the theater is also, it's like, you know, the Hamiltonification of the thing is that like people think they're like, oh, like we've heard hip hop, we've seen Hamilton, and they hear you like rap and they're like, this hurts my ears. You know what I mean? And so I was tired of fucking playing those spaces, man. I was like, no, you don't really want this, right? They don't really want it. And so it was like, now in LA, at least in the film and TV shit, like because there's a culture of like licensing modern songs and like putting things into a sonic context in that way, they do actually like the music. You know what I mean? And so, but I feel like I'm rambling. We'll get back to it. Let's do the next one.
Well, so I have a question, unless Nick, you have a response.
Well, I do want to kind of talk further about this just because, that's kind of what we talk about a lot, Shay, just in a different way. So usually we're talking to like strictly musicians, that's their field. And we talk about how the industry always tries to put them in boxes, right? To market them. And you are bringing in that kind of same response to that, but from a different perspective. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're saying, these are all these different aspects of me. But if I bring another aspect of me to this one audience that likes this other aspect of me, and I try to combine the two, it's like, oh, what's going on? Like people don't respond well to that.
So, okay. So I'm gonna let you on a secret that I don't tell nobody, is that I used to rap under a different name for like many years. I won't tell you what it is. You'll probably find it, but it's horrible. It's like a late name you come when you're 16. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I like rapped under this long ass name that was too hard to put on a flyer. And then I wrote under my real name is Christopher Gabriel Nunez, right? And so I wrote under Christopher Gabriel Nunez. And so I had 2 websites and this whole fucking thing. And then right before like I was about to announce this, a bunch of shit that was gonna happen, I was kind of gonna have to handle press in a certain way. I was like, I actually think I'm gonna change my name. And everyone on my team was like, what does that mean? And I was like, I think I wanna rhyme under a name that sounds more like a real name. And I wanna write under a name that sounds more like a rap name. And I wanna put it all together, right? So Gabo is a diminutive of Gabriel, right? It's also the Colombians use that term affectionately to talk about Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And so it felt like it had a literary tradition. And I was like, yo, Chris Gabo, done. We're doing that. And part of the thing is that, it's funny, like Donald Glover has Donald Glover as a writer and Childish Gambino as a musician. And I was like, I wanted it all to be the same thing. That was like the one thing I wanted to like kind of do different, was because I wanted people to have to contend with it. You know what I mean? When you're like somebody else as a musician, it's like an alias, it's like an alter ego. People can be like, oh, like that's you in that mode. I'm like, no, I have one mode. You know what I mean? Right. There's a lot of stuff comes from it artistically. There are little different tentacles of it, but it's the same fucking person. You know what I mean? And so that was kind of the choice. And at first it kind of, I think, made people nervous. My dad actually brought it up the other day. He was like, no, people can't Google you from high school. And I'm like, I think it'll be okay. And he was like, but then also like the music and the thing is 2 different things. I'm like, actually, like they're not 2 different things, right? Mm-hmm. And they're coming from one person. So I wanted people to like have to contend with that when I walk into the room or when they see the name on or whatever, right? It's also good to like, frankly, if you're interested in an artist, for like everything to aggregate under the same banner, you know what I mean? So, so that was, that's how I feel about that.
So I did see when I was looking into that Gabo has a bit of a story behind it.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I was like, if you're not Colombian, no one knows what it is. It's just like they're just like Gabo is a cool sounding thing. It's a cool thing to shout on an ad lib. Happens to be this guy's name, right? But for Colombians, it was our private nickname for Gabriel Garcia Marquez, right? There are some Colombians who I think they're like, how dare you?
How dare you share our secret?
Yeah, no, but also how dare you use that name? Like you're so blah 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 blah. But I'm like, to me, it was just ill. You know what I mean? It's ill to like bring that into a mainstream space. So if we had mainstream, you know, it's funny. I'm saying we a lot. Like I feel like I'm uncomfortable with the I. I don't know why today, but I think it's like, you know, this is the only year where I've ever had anything good happen. So I feel like I get shy about it. But yeah, definitely like that name, you know, evokes a certain thing for me, which evokes, you know, Marquez's lyricism. It evokes his, you know, sort of like irreverent wildness in the work. And, you know, but that's only half the name. You know what I mean? Like Chris is my first name. And also Gabo is a diminutive of Gabriel, like I said. So it feels like it's my first and middle name. My dad always used to call me CG when I was a kid. And so like, just because in I don't know, in my house, like your middle name kind of mattered. And so I feel like it's a name that was easy for me to wrap my heart around. And sometimes my mom will call me and she's like, "Hi, Christopher, it's Mama Gabo." And I'm like, "You're so funny." And at first I thought my parents were going to be like, "Why are you fucking offended by us? You don't want to use your real name?" But they're fine.
No, I really think
I feel like that's a really good fit, honestly. Because like
it's a part of your creative expression, your identity, your identifier.
And he's like a really prominent author. Like he's internationally renowned. Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Like I read one of his books in school and I loved it a lot. And like honestly, I feel like his style kind of fits who you are in a way, personally. Like I think that, and then based on just what I've heard of your music, and then I know that you've written a couple episodes of In Treatment, which is that new HBO, it's the HBO reboot that they just did. Like if you're capable of writing like that, like come on now, come on, Gabo. All right, serious. That's what I'm saying.
Listen, I appreciate it.
I do. I find it intriguing that you have these templates, as you said, of people that you look up to, and you can see that there is a path to this place where you want to be, you know, combining the world of film and music and finding your space. But at the same time, you know, I want to go back to what you were saying earlier about, you know, as a musician in film and TV, it's almost like that Hamilton-esque, like prestigious space where they're just like, oh, you're just a musician. Or alternatively, in the music space, they're, oh, you're a writer. And I think that like separation and that like viewing of otherness is a missed opportunity. You know, writing lyrics and writing shows like comes from a creative space that you need to get into within, you know, like any realm, film or music. So how do you feel that you know, you can bring the two together? We have talked to other creatives, Rob Marat being one, who do go between the lines of music and film and have been able to kind of bring it together because they are one person, like you said, like Childish Gambino, Donald Glover, like different names, one person, one brain. Is there separation for you in your creative expression, or is it one?
Well, ultimately, right, like language is like purposeful noise. You know what I mean? The other day, I forget who was saying this, basically like to never forget that words are a sound, right? My boy Puglisi and I, we were in the cab on the way here, and I was talking about, so I don't know if y'all heard that new Run the Jewels remix with Lil Wayne on it. It's the song Ooh La La. And so there's a remix with Lil Wayne on it, and the verse starts, and it's just kind of quintessential Wayne, like he's like, ooh la la, it's young moo la la, me no do rabagoo. And I was like, these are noises, right? And it's so hot because it's sound first, right? Sometimes I'll kick a Wayne verse to my wife and she's like, babe, this is like sound poetry. I don't even know what's going on. But to me, it's like, it's just so fly how it's like, it really is their notes right there. They're notes on a keyboard, if you think about it. And then also they're just like really full noises, right? And all those noises are also present in the spoken language, right? So like, when I saw Anthony Ramos do those episodes of In Treatment, I was like, he's rapping out here, bro. Like he's using, because he's a fucking theater actor, right? He's able to use that language with like a versatility and and it's like dance, right? It comes out of the body and it's embodied and it's full and it's it's moving across the screen the same way that words move across the page or move through space. So it's like, ultimately, all we're doing is like, and by we, I mean like anybody who writes anything, if you're any good, you're trying to like make the sounds dance. And it doesn't matter if it's inside of 16 bars or it's inside of a script or it's as an actor taking someone else's words and lifting it off the page. So like, I think that the important thing is to like, for me, is to never, I had a friend one time in college be like, I remember he said like, bring all your tools to everything at all times, right? And my wife said a similar thing. My wife's a way better writer than me. You should talk to her. But I had gone back to writing poetry for the first time in a long time. And, you know, I was primarily writing narratives. So when I wrote these poems, they were like only lyric. And, you know, any good poet will tell you that like the whole thing when you're writing a poem is to balance the narrative and the lyric. But basically I had no narrative in my poem. And she was like, these are just like very beautiful like words, but there's no narrative, which makes no sense because you write narrative. And I was like, yeah, no, but narrative is over there and lyric is here. And she was like, no, you have to bring everything to the party at all times. That's kind of what my homie in college said too. It's like, if you're good at making sound ill, you're good at telling story, and you're good at, you know, structure, you just do it all at the same time, right? If you're doing it all at the same time, then it shouldn't be that hard to transition from one to the other, right? Because you almost like, it's all the same skill, it's just the container is like different, you know what I mean? So I just try to remember that. Like you want, my ideal thing is that it's like, with narrative writing, if you were to take page 37 and just throw it into the air, and then somebody on 7th Avenue is like, gets stuck to their foot and they pick it up, like that page by itself is fire. And someone's like, what else? Just on a pure sonic level, that like the words are ill, the sounds are ill, and that it stands by itself alone. You know what I mean? Right. And that's the same thing. That's the same way I approach rhyming as a rapper or singing as a singer. So it's like, I feel like if you're coming to it with that kind of integrity every time, then it's really not that different.
I have.
Shay, did you want to continue this?
Well, I have a question leading in a new direction. If that's
well, I did. Is it leading to his music? Because I do want to talk about one of those, the new song.
You can, yeah. I was just gonna ask, and maybe this goes together. I was gonna ask if you are serving for an impact, if you are carrying a mission in your work, in your writing.
Yes, I mean, look, you know, if we go back, right, and look at like indigenous ritual, right, those, you know, a lot of these dances and songs were not, it wasn't a metaphor like, oh, we're like dancing to bring the rain. They're like, no, we're actually trying to make it literally rain from the sky so that the harvest can come, right? And so to me, it's like every song or every, you know, story or whatever, you know, may have a different goal, but I'm always trying to make something actually happen. It always has to be about ritual. It always has to be about like evoking a feeling or you know, striking a particular passion in that, you know, in the viewer and the listener. And then, you know, it can go, they can have whatever experience they want, but I have to have an intention about, you know, and a ritualistic intention when I'm in the process of it. You know what I mean?
So yeah, I think that just perfectly segues into this, because like I wanted to know what your kind of thought was behind with one of those. Like, what was your like mission for that? And like, does it link into your broader mission as a creative?
One of those is really, it's funny, I remember writing it. I remember my cousin JP, or Brainius, who produced it, who produced all my shit. We were like about to go, basically I was in New Haven at the time and he was in New York, and we were like, yo, let's just go to New Haven and let's like work, right? And he was like, oh, my car is at my parents' house in Long Island. Why don't we go there and then I'll drive us to New Haven? And we get there, and his parents had parked their car right in front of the garage, so we couldn't move it. Like we were like, fuck, we can't get the car to the garage. We don't know, we're just stuck. So we were just like, all right, why don't we just right here? So we ordered some food and we just like wrote, and I remember it being like, our music had been very like complex, you know, and sort of like rhythmically complex and stuff. And I was craving something like simpler, right? And so he played me this beat, and I was just like, dude, just like slow it down. I just want to slow it down to like super slow it down. And as when he slowed it down and simplified it, it was just so aggressive. Like I was like, this is like some fucking, you know, chew up a glass bottle and spit it out. I mean, it was like really, really aggressive. And, you know, at the time I was feeling like, it's interesting when I, as an actor, when I was in class studying Meisner, they would always, a funny thing would happen, right? Where like, and it's interesting how much like the sort of societal expression of gender is like in the body without you thinking about it. Cause like if an actor was a woman, she would come up early on and have really good access to like devastation, to tears, to anything that was like, you know, that, you know, they had an easy time crying on stage basically. And no matter what the situation was, and then but they couldn't access rape. This is a generalization, but I just saw it across first year, right? And then but they had a hard time accessing rage, right? And then inevitably a man would come on stage and they had like zero access to that, but like all this access to rage. And kind of part of the beginning was trying to like get people to unlock the access to both of those things, right? And one of the things that the teacher would say to the male actors would be like, yo, like when you're this like anger, this thing that you have, like it's kind of shallow, like there's nothing in it. And why don't you look at your scene partner here, right? And like see like how like the depth of her devastation, right? If you take that and then put a strong action on it, that will be anger, right? And so what I surmised from that was that rage, true rage, is just a broken heart with somewhere to go. You know what I mean? And then they would kind of take that same thing, and that's what they would, you know, often tell, you know, a young woman who was an actor who like was having trouble accessing her rage. They were like, yo, you have the devastation, you have the broken heart. Now you have to do something. Just really do very directly towards the object of your devastation, that it will become anger. You know what I mean? And so I think that with this joint, I was like, I mean, obviously, like it's some super lyrical rap shit, some super tough guy shit, some super like angry shit, but I was writing from the point of view of a broken heart there. You know what I mean? It was like, you know, I was trying to write a song that's like, you know, this is the part in the movie where like, you know, the bad guy sort of acquiesces to their role they didn't choose. You know what I'm saying? And I was in a point in my life where I just felt like for the first time in my life, I had like enemies, you know what I mean? And like, and I didn't like that. And I didn't want that. And that's not like a way that I move through the world. I think that's just not really, I think, who I am. And that's not who I want to be, right? But I felt like I was kind of had it coming from all directions. And I sort of also felt like I was, like the way I was being perceived was a, you know, as a threat. As a person that like, it was like this thing that I didn't understand really where it was coming from because it never really happened in my life. And then and then the simplicity of like, you know, the chorus where I was just like, all right, he's one of those, you know, fuck it. If that's what you want, then I'm going to give you that. Right. And that's when, and then, you know, it came out the da, 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 one of those. And like the first two verses were just like front footed, fuck you, I'm gonna eat you for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and you know, aperitif. And then the third verse, I was like, I want to get melodic for 10 seconds and explain. Do you know what I mean? And that's where they're like, you know, that's what like, you know, I am what the fuck you made me, you know what I mean? Let me take your boot off of my chest, then fuck it, you're gonna really hate me. And then we went back to it, right? And I was like, I felt like I needed that, right? Because I felt like I was, you know, it was a song that I had written from the defensive, but I was like, I wanted to be front footed the whole time. And I also wanted to like, to explain itself to the listener who's looking for an explanation. But then if you're not looking for an explanation, you could just rock with it and be like, this shit is hard. This is something to like, you know, bump and whatever. But that it had that complexity inside of it. And I think we got, pretty close to it.
Yeah, you got it. I felt the energy. It was coming through the screen. No, you got it.
Good. And also to bar off, you know what I mean? Like, so it's funny. The other day I was with my homie. We were driving with this rental car to Boston, and like I kind of tricked her. She was like, I was DJing, and I sort of tucked one of those in between this Drake song and this Young M.A. song, and I didn't say anything. I just wanted to see if like, is this a real song? Like, is she gonna notice? Like, ugh, what is this? You know what I mean? And it worked. She didn't notice anything. She was like, yo, this shit is hard. And she just kind of like, and I was like, okay. And then she was like, this guy sounds like you. And I was like, haha. Right. And then you listen to it again. But I was like, no one, it was the first time where like I've been able to put a joint in between two industry joints and it like nothing happened. Like nothing. Because it's like when you're sanding something like a piece of wood, you kind of run your hand over it trying not to get a splinter. So the point is not notice. And that's what I wanted. Right. I wanted her to not notice that anything had changed, not be like.
You did it perfectly.
I'm having so many just internal conversations with myself right now because of what you were saying. And I feel like we could go on. And I honestly am like, let's do a second interview. Like, let's just keep it going. But I want to, okay, so there's some things in particular. I'm trying to bring it all together. There's some things in particular that I wanted to touch on, and that is this point of feminine ability to access emotion, male ability to access rage. I think that that's very much societal and expectations and standards and pushing down on female ability to be angry, because trust me, I've got some rage, okay? And the other side is, that you mentioned putting your music, right next to Young M.A., which she serves rage, and she opens up this space that I feel like you are very much in that same realm of what am I trying to say here? Of helping people access that emotion, almost, I would say.
Okay.
I agree with that, for sure.
But I do want to kind of lead into a different question here, because I want.
Can I say two things real quick?
Yes.
Yeah. Please.
I want to be clear that it's funny. I sometimes struggle with telling, because I feel like that story about that acting shit is relevant, but it's also gender's fake. I'm not saying that any of that's real. I'm just saying it was the gendered socialization that was coming through, right? Where you were and so we had to unlearn a lot of that shit in order to access the other side of that, right? It was just an interesting
But your approach to that breaks down those barriers, breaks down that approach of separation of gender and gender emotion, because you're absolutely right. Gender is abstract, all right? You cannot be bound by that.
But the conditioning is very real.
Yeah,
it's a condition. It's frankly, just me, I don't believe in gender. I don't know that it's I think that your own understanding of your own gender has to come from an understanding of how you've been socialized and how you wish to be expressed in the world. You know what I'm saying? And I think that frankly, in the body that I'm in, anger is just more acceptable. It's just I don't know. I mean, look, I would love to actually I have a joint that I'm kind of working on with this classical composer where I'm this is the closest I've ever done to an Adele song, but I'm it doesn't necessarily, right? It doesn't come out of me as having, now I think I'm more grown and I'm breaking it down. But I think initially I was it wouldn't feel appropriate for me to express my heartbreak the way Adele expresses her heartbreak, right? But it might be to do it the way that, I don't know, the Zach De La Rocha expresses his heartbreak, but it's all the same thing. And I think that's why an artist like Young M.A., we're so excited, because we're because she's queering all of it. You know what I'm saying? And it's it's just.
I also love Young M.A. That's just very personal. So when you said Young M.A., I was like,
I want a Young M.A. feature so bad, yo. That would be actually.
Speak it into existence, all right? Speak it into existence. And then honestly, if you really even want to complex or make that conversation a little bit more complex when it comes to expressing heartbreak and anger, it gets a little bit more complex when it comes to cross-racial boundaries too. For me as a Black man, I can't sit up here and express my anger. I'll get shot. 100%. What the heck? I have to find a creative way to do that. So 100%. I'm happy that you brought that up.
I do have a question, and I know that we should be rounding out soon. I would like to know, who do you see as a cultural resetter? You know, we are the cultural reset, and we try to capture those who are pushing the industry and pushing themselves for themselves within music and film.
Cultural reset. That's a really, yo, do y'all know the rapper Cakes the Killer?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely we do.
I think that that's a motherfucker who's like on some cultural reset shit. He could, it just like, I feel like when there's just so many ill queer rappers right now, especially in the New York scene, right? But I feel like the industry sort of ghettoizes them into being like, okay, this is like, it's just like they think it's like, oh, this is like a certain type of shit, but it's not in the same conversation as like Royce the 5'9". And I think that I love Case because he totally obliterates that because he can fucking rap. You know what I mean? It's just like he's a spitter and he's on some New York shit and he's just like crazily raps, and then also is rapping about like nutting on your six pack and like it's really, and you don't see it coming. You're in the twister flow. You know what I mean? You're like, this is super nasty and homoerotic and also like bar heavy. And like everyone, like whenever I don't usually DJ parties, but whenever I do, I always throw on a Cake song. And everyone, it's like a lot of people like they might not. If you put a Cakes the Killer song in between like a Cardi song and a Megan song, it actually like it's so it vibrates the room. And people, a lot of people are like, oh, I didn't know that was coming, or I didn't see that, or like, they might not even know who it is in that moment. But I feel like, yeah, that's an artist. Also, Tierra Whack. I feel like Tierra Whack is like doing a thing like that's just like on another level. Like I don't understand, you know what I mean? And like those early music videos where they were like 10 seconds long, but there was like 30 of them. Like I was like, I don't know what's happening, and I'm so into it. And then I remember I heard her when I felt actually recently, like I was like, oh, the culture has reset itself. There's this song called TD. You guys probably know it's like, I think it's like Lil Yachty or somebody, but then there's it's like his song, but then it's ASAP Rocky and Tyler and then Tierra Whack. And I was like, and hearing obviously like, you know, Rocky's been along for a long time, and like Yachty's kind of like more sort of, I hope it's Yachty, but one of those younger SoundCloud cats who's like come up in melodic was like the main artist, but you know, it was Rocky, Tyler, and Tierra Whack. And when I heard Tierra Whack's verse and I heard Tyler's verse, I was like, oh, these are the cats that we're going to be checking for the way that 2 years, the way that now I think of like, you know, I'm always looking for a Pusha T feature. Whenever I see a Pusha T feature on something, I'm like, that's what I want to listen to. And I'm like, okay, like Tyler and Tierra Whack are now in that lane. Mm-hmm. And for that to be a woman and an out queer rapper, like I was like, this is crazy. That shit wasn't happening 6 years ago. You know what I mean? And like, and the song wasn't like necessarily political. It was just a crazy banger. And I was like, okay, something has happened, right? Because though also it's funny because Tyler, you know, with all the singing, so like he wasn't necessarily a cat that people were coming to for a hot 16 to sell a single or whatever. And now I'm like, now people are, you know, now he has a song with Freddie Gibbs and all this stuff. So like that was a moment where I felt like it was a cultural reset moment. And also such a good song. Yeah.
And also say that they got there because they fucking deserve it. I don't swear often on this, but like they really, you know, like put in the work and got themselves there because of their skill, because they carried themselves, because they didn't rely on others to get them there.
100%. Yeah, they paved their own path because they were just themselves. Like that's,
yeah. Which I also, you know, like I personally would consider you a cultural resetter, you know, like what you were saying about your work being a ritual and connecting to it in that way, and your expression of emotion and your range of emotion and being able to capture that and push that through in your work is impactful. So yeah, I appreciate that from you. I do want to ask you, you know, Nick, go for it.
Well, I was going to ask our general like closing question.
I was going to do the same. So great.
We're on the same way. So you, like we've been talking about, you have all this experience from all these different mediums, and you are just like an all-around creative. What advice do you have for any creatives that are pursuing a career in TV or film or music, or all of them?
So I think there would be I'm gonna give two different specific types of advice, right? I feel like if you're trying to break into like film and TV as a writer, don't be an assistant. That's my number one thought, is that because you won't write and they'll think of you as an assistant. You know, it's hard. I know a couple people who like assistanted their way up to being a writer, but it's fucking hard. I think if you're trying to break in as a writer, I think you're better off living somewhere really cheap, having a day job and just writing until you feel like you have the thing that you can then go out and sell, right? Because you can spend 5 years assisting, right? And it's funny because actually this is from experience, because when I was in college, first of all, playwrights weren't cool. The only way to get into TV was to write like a 30 Rock spec or whatever, right? And I didn't know how to do that. I'm not a good mimic in that way. I couldn't keep up with those kids. And then I really wanted to be a playwright. And then when I went to grad school, everyone was like, LOL, guess you don't want to actually be here, have fun, dying in obscurity, right? And then all I did was like, maybe they're right. And I just wrote my plays. Quietly. And then because, a lot of this is luck and timing, I came out and suddenly playwrights were hot in Hollywood. And now everyone wanted to have, they almost prefer to play as a sample over, a pilot or whatever. And I only had that because I had spent all the time getting good at writing, right? Look, the networking and stuff, that will come if you have something fire and you can get, I always also hesitate when people are like, if you just focus on the work, then that's not true. You have to know people, right? But it's easier to get into those doors if you actually, if the thing is like something you worked on for fucking 5 years, you know what I mean? Whereas like, it's a difficult position to be in if you're like, let's say you assisted all these huge showrunners and whatever, and you have all these connections in Hollywood now because you've been assisting for 3 years. And they're like, all right, Shay, I want to read your script. And your script's not ready? That sucks because talent didn't meet timing. Timing was there and talent was like not there. So that's my thing as a writer, would be to like, don't move to LA and just if you're not ready, you know what I mean? Like LA is a marketplace, but you have to have the thing ready to sell. If the fucking have to have the thing ready to, don't take them there, you cook them for longer, right? As a musician, man, I need advice as a musician. I don't know if I can give advice as a musician. But I think that my advice as a musician would be to like invest in the people around you and get them to invest in you, right? Like the only reason why my music sounds as good as it does now is because all the production is Brainius, and he's my cousin. My older cousin, right? Like if I used to pay for beats, I used to be like everything, I would just like shop beats and like pay $400 for this beat and blah, 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 all this stuff. And the shit sounded, some of it was good, but then it was like, it's hard to build a sound like that. Cause it's like, okay, this beat sounds that way and this beat sounds that way. And it's one thing, you can put together an album with a bunch of different producers if you have like huge industry contacts and you're able to be like, I have this Dr. Dre beat and this Metro Boomin beat, and they complement each other in these ways. But when you don't have that access, just beats from random producers, it makes it sound like not serious. And I have old records that one day I might put some of them online, but like they're interesting, but they're all over the place sonically. You know what I mean? And I remember I was working on some record and my cousin called me. He was my older cousin who he's the one who like put me onto every single song I'd ever listened to ever. And then whenever I would like it, then the next year he'd be like, that band's not cool anymore. So like we have a long musical relationship, right? But he's older than me. And one day he called me and he was like, hey man, I heard you're putting out an album. Like I started making beats. Can I put a beat on your album? And I was on my high horse and I was like, that's not how this works. Okay. We're on, song 14. You can't just come in here and blah, blah. And then I was like, all right. And he sent it to me and I was like, oh, this is good. And I was like, let me see if he can take a note. So I was like, all right, I like this beat, but can you put it in this structure? He did it. And then since then, there's been no other producers, right? Also because he wasn't making me pay him up front. He was like, let's get the money on the other end of it, right? Because it's hard to like the creative process to be like 350. And it's like, it makes you not really want to like throw ideas at the wall, right? Because you're just like burning money. So I think it's like, if you're a rapper or a singer, you know what I mean? Like either become a producer yourself or build a relationship with one person, right? And then obviously you can branch out. Like I'll rhyme on other people's beats and whatever. But like when I go to make a record, I know who I'm making it with, because you don't want to start from scratch every time with relationships and building a sound. It's just like too much. So those are my 2 pieces of advice. To recap, number 1, don't be an assistant. Go write in a cheap city and come back when you can sell it. Number 2, build relationships with a producer or learn to produce yourself. But buying beats forever is, don't do that.
No, don't do that.
That's some great advice though. Like definitely noted.
And drink water.
Yeah. Stay hydrated, folks.
Stay hydrated.
All right. Well, honestly, Chris, thank you so much for hopping on to have this discussion with us. I would really love to have you back on our platform.
I think that our listeners and our viewers, you know, like this was a really insightful interview conversation with you. And I want to get you out there more with the cultural reset, because like I said, you're a cultural resetter. Like, you know, I hope that people can look up to you the way you look up to Donald Glover. So
that's very nice of you to say. Please go stream one of those. Price of Anarchy is out December 10th. Okay, so maybe we could do it again around then. So thank you so much.
Yes, December 10th.
Absolutely.
Take care, y'all.
Got it. All right, take care.